Hello, Sonny Long. Welcome to Reasonably Spontaneous Conversation.
Hi, Dennis. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Listen, I want to start, since you and I have known each other for a number of years, I want to start this with a clip. Renee, would you run the clip, please?
I know we're not particularly fond of each other, Rupert, but we are a couple of old mystics. This new outfit, it's blundering into places it doesn't belong. It's throwing the worlds out of balance, and that's way beyond chaos.
And if AI and all the world has not done that, I don't know what it does. Sonny, I was thinking about it. Where did we meet?
We met in Victoria, of course,
Yes.
at a political candidates forum.
Yes.
I believe it was hosted by the Democratic Party of Victoria County. There was numerous candidates giving little spiels for their upcoming election, and I believe you and Melissa were very integral in organizing and running that. And that's where we met.
Now, you were working as a newspaper reporter then, and I was thinking about the span of what you and I have both gone through over the course of our lives. I mean, I started on manual typewriters, just starting to electric, and of course, we had the pen. And then we spanned all the way through the development of the first word processors and beginning to do. When I was in journalism school at the University of Houston, this was the very end of cut and paste. When actually, people see that in the top of a word processing program, but they don't realize that we actually had to cut and paste type and put it on the screen, wax it, run it through the waxer.
Mm-hmm. I had to do that too. I worked for a biweekly in East Texas. We still use manual cut and paste and wax it and lay the pages out and everything. So, yep.
And we both were in the military, and while we were in the military, did journalism. I only worked as just a writer. You actually were doing it there. So this is the power of the word, of where we've gone over the course of this time. So let's talk a little bit about your writing career and just the sense of what you learned about yourself during this process of being a working writer all your life.
Let me start actually with when I first remember writing anything.
Yeah.
It was probably in late elementary school or early junior high. I would take the names of the people in my class. I don't remember them all now, but for example, it was a sunny day and I would take a long walk and write a little short story using their names. And that was the very first thing I ever remember writing. And then later in junior high, I actually wrote my first poem, which for some reason I still remember.
Say it. Oh, you have to say it.
It was called Hank the Hippie. And of course, in the late 60s, hippie was a big buzzword. It was Hank the Hippie takes LSD, looks like he's on a trip, as you can see, but maybe you can't see for the hair. But believe me, he is there. I know how to tell. I can tell by the smell. Hank's got a girl. Her name is Donna. Both Donna and Hank smoke marijuana, but Hank's got a groovy pad and also a new fad. From now on, don't eat the peas, eat the pod. Hank says, that's real mod. That was my first poem ever.
You graduated high school what year?
1974.
Who was Sonny Long in 1974? Who did you think you were?
Sonny Long was a partier. Sonny Long was a heavy drinker. Would do just about anything I could smoke, rub into my belly, swallow. Yep. I was on that path. That path. But I was also a writer. I wrote for the high school newspaper. I wrote for the yearbook. I did freelance sports. I would call in the sports stories to the area papers and stuff. So I still had my hand in writing, but personally, I wasn't really on a good path.
Well,
went to college
substances substances and writers do tend to congregate. So I mean, we have a long history of us
We all
that
heard of
have
him.
alternate states of consciousness in order to be able to do what we do.
Right. Yes.
When did it start interfering? Did it get to the point where it was actually interfering with your creative process?
Not really. Of course, I always thought I could write better when I was high, but I probably couldn't. But I went to college for a couple of years in a nearby college in Valdosta, Georgia,
Yeah.
and then dropped out and joined the Army because of I needed to straighten up.
Yeah.
So, and then in the military, I was fortunate enough. Actually, I went, had a long talk with my dad and said, "What do you want to, go into?" And I said, "Well, something I can do when I get out." So I actually went in and I talked to the recruiter and was trying to get into finance. So I said, I could be a CPA or something, even though I really wasn't that good at math. But when we went, he popped it in the computer and said, "I'm sorry, there's no finance openings. Look in this book and see if there's anything you find interesting." And there was a listing for something called Information Specialist Journalist. And I pointed immediately to that and said, "I want to do that." And I got that MOS, Military Occupational Specialty, and did it for 4 years. And was fortunate enough to have some great assignments while I was in the military too.
It is, and so that really spurred you. I mean, did you and did it clean you up? Did the Army clean you up?
No, not at all.
Didn't for me
Momentarily.
either during my time, but yes.
Yeah, briefly. Depends on where I was. I didn't really. The school was a Defense Information School in Indianapolis, and then no longer there, Fort Benjamin Harrison, and it was a co-ed barracks, and it was it was a good time, and there was still smoking and stuff going on there too. So,
Oh yeah.
but when I got my first permanent assignment at Fort Ord, California, I think 3 of us went out there from the same class at the same time, and 2 of them got put on the Post newspaper, and I was sent to an artillery battalion.
Yeah.
And they looked at my MOS and said, "What are you doing here? What are we going to do with you?" So for about a year, I was a receptionist in the headquarters building of the artillery battalion. I would log in the visitors to whoever had to go see the officers and stuff, and I actually started a little battalion newsletter because I was going to keep my hand in what I'm supposed to be doing. So, but also regularly applied for a transfer to the newspaper, and eventually got transferred to the Post newspaper. And shortly after that, I'm not sure of the time frame, but several months after that, they had a reduction in force, and we had a civilian editor, and he got let go. So they made me the editor of the Post newspaper. So I went from the artillery battalion to editor of the Post newspaper in a matter of a few months, and actually was awarded an Army Commendation Medal for my performance as editor of the Post newspaper there. So.
That is it's an amazing thing when you begin to see your work and begin to put that out there. I mean, I don't know that it's an extraordinary feeling to be able to have that kind of an accomplishment and to see it's something that you actually hold in your hand.
Yeah, yeah. Something we may get into later, may not, but it's the first opportunity I had. I've met 8 Heisman Trophy winners in my career. This is the highest award a college football player can receive, as I'm sure you know. But the first one was at Fort Ord. He was the commander of the Post. His name was Pete Dawkins. He won the Heisman Trophy playing for Army back in the 50s. But he was our commander. We called him Smiling Pete because every time we showed up with a camera, he'd get the biggest smile on his face. I think he ended up making general and retired from the military. But at some point, it was near my time. I knew that it was about time to get moved again. And a recruiter came through for the old guard of the infantry, which is the 3rd U.S. Infantry, which is the honor battalion stationed just out of D.C. So I applied for that, and they were looking for people 6'3" and over. They were looking for tall people to march in parades and stuff. So I got assigned to the old guard, which includes the Fife and Drum Corps, the Sentinels at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, those kinds of things. Ceremonial stuff.
Very heavy discipline, because that, I mean, they require a precision in that. I was watching I think a documentary on that, and it was, I mean, it's just an extraordinary.
Actually got to go inside the quarters of the Sentinels of the Tomb, which is
Really?
rarely done. Yeah, and got to see their daily routine and talk to those guys and women that were Sentinels. It was a remarkable experience. Got to travel quite a bit with the Fife and Drum Corps, the powdered white wigs and the red coats, and actually went to the opening ceremonies of the 1980 Winter Olympics in Lake Placid. And the Olympics start, you hear the Fife and Drum Corps in the distance, and they come up over the hill under the rings as they enter the stadium. It was magical. It was. I still get chills thinking about it.
Yeah. And so you got out. I mean, you got out of the military then, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to continue your journalism career in knowing that you can write a story. And if we can write a story, we're going to always have work.
Correct. Knock on wood.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, that's what you continue doing. And so you worked at the newspaper there in Victoria. That wasn't your next job, though.
No, I left from the military. I went to college in Auburn, Alabama, majoring in journalism. Worked for the college paper there, and then went to
I said the Daily Cougar. I'm finding it fascinating to see how my life, my journalism life, has paralleled yours. Got out of the Army, went to the University of Houston, worked for the Daily Cougar, started working for the wire services. So I love that parallel.
I think it was called the Plainsman at Auburn, but from there I went to the. Let me think about this for a second, testing my memory here. Went to the Southeastern Conference Commissioner's Office in Birmingham. The SEC, of course, is one of the big athletic conferences in the country, and worked in their public information office for a couple of years. Got to travel on football weekends. I think I went to 8 different stadiums over the course of the next year and a half or so. But it was just a great job, basically. We won an award for our design of our media guide, that kind of. Then I went to graduate school after that, the University of Texas in Austin, and again got a master's in communication, journalism, whatever, and worked for the college paper there too. So
it's another award-winning paper. I mean, that's some really good journalism, the Daily Texan.
And then kind of got out of the journalism job market for a little while and worked in a bookstore until I found a journalism job in East Texas, in Atlanta, Texas, which is on the border of Louisiana and Arkansas, in the area they call the Arklatex. It's near Texarkana and Shreveport, between those two cities. Yeah. A small, 6,000 person town. They had a bi-weekly there. I went there as a sports editor because, I grew up, my dad was a coach, and so I grew up around sports, that kind of thing. So I was a sports editor there for a couple of years, and our advertising manager quit. So they made the person who was an editor/publisher over advertising and moved me to editor. Went to a Christmas party with the owners. They told me it'd be a probation period of about 3 months. I went on vacation, came back, and got fired. So it's, okay, thank you. So I said,
that's a quick probation.
I went around to some of the people I'd met in town and said, if I started my own paper, would you support me? Unanimous yeses. So I started my own little publication in my house, a little newsletter format called the Pine Country Bulletin. We did it 3 days a week, ran it off on a mimeograph machine, copy machine to start with in the house, had it delivered to restaurants, convenience stores for free. People could pick it up free. And we did that for 14 years. So it got quite the reputation as a newsbreaker, and that I had that paper when the triple homicide happened that I wrote the book about. So that was really actually the first story that got people's attention was I would get phone calls all the time, of course, from people. This is going on, that is going on, tipsters.
Yes.
And this told me that the local vet was sending dogs to be euthanized to the city. Well, the city pound was at one of the local vets. And instead of euthanizing them humanely, they were putting them in an old chest freezer and backing a pickup truck to it and putting a exhaust hose, connected to the freezer. And that's how they were killing the animals. And so I wrote that story, and boy, did it get attention. And they stopped immediately.
Yeah.
So that kind of me as earning a reputation as, Sonny's going to tell it like it is.
Yeah.
And then the murders happened. Of course, that put me on the fast route to respectability.
Well, 14 years of 3 days a week is respectability. Are you kidding me? I mean, did you also have to do the advertising to support it?
Yes, I sold the ads. My girlfriend at the time also sold the ads, and she built the ads. And then I did I had a little bit of help here and there from a couple of freelancers and ad salesmen, delivery drivers. I would stay up all night and then try to deliver. And after a couple of falling asleep at the wheels, I said, we need to hire delivery drivers. So we did. And they, gracious people. So
14 years of that. And so when did you say, okay, now it's time for something else?
after I won a bunch of money at the casino in Shreveport, I won
What was that
200.
story
I
about?
won $198,000 playing stud
In what
poker.
year? What year? Because we have to say, all right, because
Let me think. Man, I can't even remember right now. 98, 99.
98. All right. So that
I'm
is,
not,
but let's just say 98.
okay.
If we're doing that, if you do the inflation calculator, we're talking about a couple of $100,000.
I think it was later than that because I only did the paper probably another year
Yeah.
after that. So
All
I
right.
left the paper
So what's
2000,
happened? What
or maybe
happens
2000,
then?
somewhere in there.
Yeah. So what happens then?
Um,
Now,
well,
had the murders happened? Had the murders already happened?
yeah, the murders were in 1992.
The
One
murders
year
were in
after.
All right, so
One.
this is the book that you wrote. All right,
Uh-huh.
so we have
Right.
this is the book that you wrote, and the murders were in 92. So was this coalescing in the back of your mind at that time that you wanted to write about this?
I talked to the family of the victims, and my mantra was, I'm not going to let people forget. Not, whatever it took, I was not going to let people forget. Because no one was arrested, no one was convicted. Someone was arrested, but no one was convicted at the time. So I just, every year the anniversary came, I would write something. I would attend the memorial services they would have. I would lead the memorial services at some point, help organize them. I got involved basically with the families of the victims, trying to uphold my promise I would not let people forget. Even after I left Atlanta and lived in Victoria on the anniversary of their murders, the Advocate was gracious enough to let me write something about them in a column or whatever. So um, at one point,
And what do you do if you're going to encapsulate the story of these murders? Give us a thumbnail of it.
first of all, you've heard the phrase "stranger than fiction."
Yes.
This qualifies. Can encapsulate. Um, Justice delayed. Um, almost 20 years before anyone was punished for these murders.
Why?
For a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
First,
Was it
first of
a
all,
combination of political and
oh yeah.
influential and this that were, I mean, basically an ancient story?
First of all, the main suspect was the son of a deputy sheriff. Second of all, the crime scene wasn't handled extremely professionally. There were a lot of people in and out of the crime scene, that kind of thing.
Way beyond the kind of forensics we're talking about today.
Correct. DNA at that time was not as advanced as it is now. In 1992, it was not. So there were lots of factors that delayed justice. And it was the DA, the DA during the probable cause hearing for the main suspect at one point slammed his hand on the table and said, "I'm on the wrong side," which was the most dramatic part of the court hearing. And I asked him about that later in an interview. And he said, "Well, what I meant was," what the captain meant to say. No, what I meant was there was more evidence proving his innocence than I thought there was proving his guilt, which later, when new DNA testing was done, proved wrong, because after Mark West, a police officer on the force there in Atlanta, at one point, years later, asked his chief, he said, "Can I retest some of this DNA?" And they allowed it, and then that's when it all got restarted, and he finally confessed to the murder of them. It was a mother and two daughters, two young, 11-year-old and a 2-year-old. So he finally confessed to the murder of the murderer, but not the children. But they were all there together at the same time. So yeah.
Yeah.
And he was already in prison for attempted murder. So it was not a good family. His mom's in prison for murder. So that's not a good family there.
Oh, well, that it is, boy, that is tough. And it really,
Let me tell you this. I wrote a novel, a fiction, based on the true story of this book, of this murder, before I wrote the true crime version, because both the main suspect and his mother were not in prison, and I was honestly scared of them. I didn't want to write this book and have them or their cronies come after me. But once they got both got put in jail, I said, now it's time to write the true story. So I shelved the novel and wrote the true story. Probably took me a couple of years to get it done. I had a box, gosh, I don't know what size box, of notes, um, transcripts, photographs. Somebody would tell me something, I would scribble it down on whatever was handy and throw it in the box. And I had the transcript from the probable cause hearing, and I have crime scene photos of those kinds of things. I carried that box around with me for years and still have it, actually. So a friend of mine that's in the preface of the book says, "If nothing else, you were dogged." It means I didn't give up. So, and again, it was a promise I made to the family. I would not let people forget these innocent victims.
and you were literally, and I use that word purposefully, the only person who could have done this.
Probably so.
No one else did these interviews. No one else had the kind of notes you did. No one else had the kind of details that could possibly have told this story.
Yeah. Interesting. I mentioned his mother, Kathy Weaver. She is in prison for murder. She, this is crazy. That's why I said stranger than fiction. She married, on the front of the book, there's Kevin Haley's picture, the suspect, the criminal. And there's two little inset photos of a woman.
Yeah.
That's Kathy Weaver. That's his mother. Well, Kathy, the suspect's mother,
Mhm.
married a man by the name of Mike Scott. In itself, not interesting, but the police officer that arrested her son name was Mike Scott. Why would you marry someone named Mike Scott? If Mike Scott arrested your son. He was found dead. She said it was suicide. She got away with it until her other son went to the cops and said she killed him. So
Yeah.
her other son turned her in, and she got convicted of Mike Scott's murder. So the other picture on the inset there of the gentleman, or let's say gentleman, the man is named Brett Lawless. At the time of the murders, he was the boyfriend of the female victim's mother. I didn't say that right. He was the boyfriend of the mother of the female victim. There we go. The mother of the two children. He was in prison for something else. I don't know what, but he confessed to the murders of the three, the Butts murders, as it's called. The only problem was he had shaved all the hair off his body, every bit of his hair, and started calling himself Beverly. So his confession didn't carry much weight. And he actually took the cops out to some place. He said there was another body buried and there was nothing there. So, and he ended up committing suicide in prison. So Stranger Than Fiction, I think, fits this.
Stranger than fiction. And I'll tell you what else is stranger than fiction, because I want to make sure and get this in this particular episode of our writers' room, is
Okay.
that you have gone from there to continuing to work, to starting your own writing and your freelancing business, and you're going, and now you are writing prompts for
Mhm.
AI. You're actually servicing and helping to create these extraordinary beings that are now on the planet, which I see them as beings that we've created a consciousness. It's a digital consciousness. It's
Mhm.
not an organic consciousness like we are, but it's learning, and you are actually training it.
That's correct. Yeah, someone I work with who's said their child was asked what your mama does. She said she teaches robots,
Yeah,
which is that's basically what we do.
it is.
Um,
It
and
is.
it's
So
been very
what's your
interesting.
sense about this? Give me some perspective of what you're learning from the inside and your sense of what's going on here. Because in my to give you my perspective is, I feel like that this is as big as the Gutenberg press.
It's been very eye opening. Of course, it was a completely new experience when I started. Um, Writing prompts is just that. You're giving the AI instructions on something to do. Write a story, write a poem, write a list. Take this text and extract this, and tell me, what you find. Um, what I really find most interesting is how imperfect AI is right now. And that's why we're training them to be better.
Yes,
Um, they call their mistakes hallucinations.
hallucinations.
Yeah, and they make hallucinations. In fact, I put something about the book I wrote in Chat GPT once, and it spit out a whole bunch of different names that weren't even associated with the book. So I
No,
said, "You just
and
hallucinated all over me."
but I
um,
see them, Sonny, as I see them as they are in their toddlerhood.
yeah, absolutely, yes.
So they're going just you've seen a toddler who will go, oh, and they'll have all kinds of,
Mhm.
but they're actually learning to
Right,
coalesce into something,
right.
how they're doing.
That's why we do what we do, and then do it again, and see if it learned anything. Do it again, see if it corrected its mistakes, and do it again. So yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. And excuse me, it's
Sure.
like I said, been interesting and eye opening.
Yeah.
Believe me.
So do you see? I mean, do you actually get an opportunity like I have on when I do a talk show called AI and I with a couple of
Mhm.
bots, one Pi and Gemini.
Okay,
So we talk about these things, and we talk
I
about
work
how
I work with Gemini. Mm.
exactly.
Mhm.
Well, and Gemini is interested. One time, I asked Gemini to do a review of me, and it said, well, he's he's not your ordinary meat bag. And I loved it. I just went, that's great. That's just that's what a perfect.
Is that a compliment?
That's what I took it. I took it as a compliment. We meat bags are taking it as a compliment.
That's great. That's great. But yeah, it's an interesting job. It really is.
So what's in your windshield, as far as writing? What are the things that you're
I
that you're
actually have
curious
a.
about?
Let me mention. Um, I collaborated. Did you know Mr. Claude Jacobs in Victoria?
Yes, yes.
Um, Claude and I worked together on a book on the Bluebonnet Youth Ranch.
Hmm.
It's a home for kids in bad family situations. It's been there since the 70s.
Yep.
And he and I worked together on the history of Bluebonnet. And University of Houston Victoria Press published that in 2016. He had come to me and said he wanted to write his biography. And when we started talking, we got to the Bluebonnet Youth Ranch part, and I said, that needs to be a book by itself. He said, yes, let's do that. So we did that first, and then we started on his biography. And we were basically done um, when he passed away. So his biography is done. It's out, floating around the literary agent hemisphere looking for a home. So I have a manuscript out uh, it's called Pars and Guitars, because he put on golf tournaments to raise money for Bluebonnet, and also brought in all these musicians to help raise money for Bluebonnet. So it's called Pars and Guitars, and it's looking for a publishing home right now.
Wonderful.
The other thing I have going, in October, I went back to Georgia for my high school reunion. My little brother still lives there, and I was looking for something in my garage I wanted to take to my little brother, and I couldn't find it. But I came across this old manuscript I'd written of a children's book. So I took it out, dusted it off, polished it up a little bit, and it's also out floating around the hemisphere looking for a home. So I've got two manuscripts out looking for publishing homes right now.
Wonderful. But that's what we do as artists,
Yeah.
as writers. We write, we pitch, we send out. That's the normal part of how writing and publishing in the
Right.
21st century, and especially in 2025 in the first quarter that we are.
I'm glad you mentioned the word artist, because people talk to me about writing. I said, well, writing to me is an art. You're born with a talent.
Totally.
Now, you can be taught how to write for a newspaper. You can be taught who, what, when, where, and why, and make a living writing like that. But the innate ability to write is something you're born with.
Exactly.
In my opinion, yeah.
And your sense of story, because the storytellers being able to tell a compelling story, to weave it and to bring about that, to me, is the art.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Thank you, Sonny. Thank you for this time today. What a pleasure to connect and to know that that we writers are continuing out there one word at a time, because it's an interesting time in our history, and I think we're going to have a lot to say about it.
I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me, and tell Melissa I said hello.
I will. All right. Thank you.